Mr. Patel, before you joined the FBI, you had very strong opinions about what the FBI was hiding regarding Jeffrey Epstein. In a September 2023 interview with Glenn Beck, you said the Black Book is under the, quote, direct control of the director of the FBI. In December 2023, you said, let us know who the pedophiles are. Even for a short time after becoming FBI director, in February of 2025, you tweeted, quote, there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned. In June, you told Joe Rogan, quote, we've reviewed all the information, we're gonna give you every single thing we have and can. But then suddenly in July, everything changed. You and Attorney General Pam Bondi released one video and said that there was nothing more to see. Your July memo says you uncovered more than 100 gigabytes of data and physical evidence, but that you had decided no further disclosure would be appropriate or Epstein files. To your knowledge, did Attorney General Pam Bondi speak to the president about what was in the Epstein files?
I can't speak for Attorney General Pam Bondi.
So to your knowledge, you don't have any information. The question was, do you have any knowledge? Do you have any knowledge?
I can't speak.
You are refusing to answer the question, so let me tell you that the Wall Street Journal reported that in May, Bondi told Trump that he was in the Epstein files, and at the same meeting said that they planned to release the files. Yesterday, you testified to Senator Kennedy that there was, quote, no credible information that Epstein trafficked girls to anyone else.
Not at all what I said.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask you this in a second, but let me tell you about the survivors, and let's bring them up here into the room. These are women who came to the Hill and testified that they were groomed at the age of 14 and 16 years old, and they called to meet with the president and to meet with the FBI and to have people investigate their claims. Some of them have never testified before. If you are so interested in getting the public to submit any information, why have you not met with them? You said you haven't met with them. Have you met with them? I'll give you one more chance.
My job as the FBI director is to invite
Is the answer whether or not you met with these women who were sexually abused and raped?
Any insinuation by you or any people on your side that I am not manhunting child predators and sex traffickers, just look at the stats. And you talk about cover-ups, man.
Mr. Chairman,
you talk about cover-ups.
And I will take as much time as
Where were you during the Obama and Biden administrations when these so-called cover-ups were going on? Why didn't anyone in those administrations talk to any of these purported witnesses?
I have some regular order, Mr. Chairman.
Single person.
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Washington.
And I'm going to take another couple
accuse the witness of something, he's allowed to respond. That's how it works.
Listen, he didn't even, excuse me, Mr. Chairman, you have always been fair, but this is not fair.
And you will get
no, this is my time, and he said that the witnesses were not credible.
Seconds of time.
I'm going to get an additional minute of time because that's how much time he took.
You won't get a minute, you'll get some seconds, what we think is under 5 minutes. You don't get a minute. That's not how it works.
Mr. Patel, are the victims of the Jeffrey Epstein horrific trafficking ring, are they credible?
Any person with information about ongoing sexual trafficking.
I'm asking you if they're credible.
Ma'am, I'm commenting on the evidence we have. We have routinely asked for people to come forward with more evidence, and we will look at it. And the evidence that we have was the same evidence that the Biden and Obama Justice Departments had. And they determined, not me, they determined that that information was not credible.
He's not letting me even ask my questions.
You ask the questions, he gives an answer. You may not like what he says, but that doesn't mean you get to interrupt him.
Answering my question.
Mr. Chairman, can we restore the gentlelady 45 seconds so she can complete her question?
We'll give her additional 30 seconds, which is what I said earlier.
I'm going to keep taking my time.
No, you'll take the time that you get.
You are not answering the question. The question is,
you just don't like the answer.
Are these women credible? It's a yes or no answer.
I have answered the question.
Well, what is the answer?
I'm telling you, I'm the only FBI director that has welcomed new information in this case. This administration is the only one that has welcomed any new information in this case.
Is there a yes or no to
present new credible information? Present new information.
Are the victims or not?
I'll tell you what happened in the last Trump administration.
Are they credible or not? You can't even say.
Victims credibly came forward, and you know what happened? President Trump authorized the indictments of Jeffrey Epstein.
Called them
not Biden,
a hoax.
not Obama.
President Trump
no one else.
called the entire thing a Democratic hoax. So I would like to ask you.
The gentlelady's time has expired. I gave her the additional 45 seconds she requested. The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for his 5 minutes.
If you would meet with the women who were sexually abused and raped and groomed at the ages of 14 and 16 years old. Are you going to cover up?
No, I'm not going to recognize the gentleman from New Jersey for his 5 minutes.
Powerful men, including those that might be on this committee.
I can yell too, Mr. Chairman, but I don't want to yell above this.
The time belongs to the gentleman from New Jersey. I appreciate the gentlelady yielding back.
Are you going to allow them to testify, Mr. Patel?
Go ahead.
Will you allow them to testify to you, Mr. Patel?
Mr. Patel, thank you for being here. I know it's been an interesting and difficult 2 days. And I wasn't going to talk about the Epstein thing because there's a lot of other issues that affect. I have to say a few words. I've sat here, I've listened to this, I've watched it, and you know, my Democratic colleagues are so concerned now, Mr. Patel, all of a sudden. Where were they last year? Where were they the year before? Where were they the year before that? Where was the last president in any of this? All I know, the only thing I see is a single letter from the ranking member that was sent in 2019 that he didn't like the plea deal, and some people signed on to that. Most of the truth, the real truth, let's be honest, let's be intellectually honest. The real truth is we didn't hear from them at all. Anybody of them. Hardly any of them ever mentioned it. Some of them didn't mention it at all until the beginning of this year. Earlier in the year it started. Not one Democrat asked Director Wray. We all remember Director Wray was here. Not once, not twice, multiple times. Nobody asked Director Wray about Epstein before. Nobody was that concerned. Where was the concern for the victims then? Where was the moral righteousness then? Where was the outrage then? Where was the sense of duty then? Where was the desire for accountability then? Where was the urgency for justice then? Most of all, where the hell was the integrity then? You know what the truth is. Let's just say it, man. Tell the truth time. The truth is, it's politically useful for them to try to do this now, even though they didn't give a damn about it in the past. But that's an insult to the victims, and that's an insult to America. Continue to do the work you're doing. Continue to uncover what needs to be uncovered. One real quick thing before I say anything to 9/11. We know that was mishandled by the past director and by the past FBIs. There are family members here. There are family members who are concerned. God Almighty, we want to get to the truth of that. I ask you, please, to meet with them and to investigate this with truth. You know, in the Biden administration, we went through a very dark and difficult period of time. The FBI trust was broken with the people. Catholics were, this is the stuff we've been talking about, were labeled radical threats for praying in their churches with their rosaries. Parents at school boards were called terrorists for standing up for their children. Hindu holy men in New Jersey. We have the largest Hindu temple in the world. They were attacked. They were put up against the wall. Just a Catholic or Christian thing. American Jews were targeted in colleges and universities, and a lot of folks in the FBI, in the past FBI, not this one, didn't give a damn. We can't go back to targeting religion. We can't go back to silencing free speech. The Biden administration did that. So I got questions for you. Hopefully thoughtful questions that you can answer for us in a thoughtful way. How is this FBI now, under your leadership, how are trust for Catholics, for Hindus, for Jews, for parents, for all the other, for just American people that were targeted by FISA because they had a different viewpoint, how are we restoring that trust in the FBI?
Multiple ways, sir. One, and maybe most importantly, is through transparency and providing the American public with the material so they can see, read it themselves as to what the abuses were in the past, whether it relates to the Catholic memo or the Hindu incident you talked about at the largest temple in North America. Any institution of faith and any member of faith will not be investigated by this FBI because they are men and women of faith ever, period.
And nor should they. Nor should they. I don't mean to interrupt you, but my God, of all the amendments to the freedom of speech, freedom to believe in what you want to believe in, I know you're standing up for that. Continue. I'm sorry. Okay. The Richmond memo was driven by a reliance on sources. The Southern Poverty Law Center. You know, the words sound nice, but the organization's not so nice. And we've seen the Anti-Defamation League distort data that counts as well as violence. have you been able to identify and eliminate these kinds of partisan sources? We welcome all sources, but we want objectivity and neutrality and decency in the way we report all this. Have you been able to uncover any information there? How do we make sure our sources are good in the future?
We have reviewed the source processes that infiltrate any institutions of faith, and they will no longer be going into institutions of faith. They will be directed towards criminal activity and protecting the homeland, the two most important missions the FBI has, and that's what we're going to continue to do.
Good. And I'll say this, there was a lot of bull today, a lot of you-know-what, and I'm not going to say it because I respect the institution so much going on around here. Continue to do the work of the people. You are here for that reason. The administration is here for that reason. It was weaponized and politicized, the FBI. I hope to God we never, ever see that again. One of the darkest parts of American history. Thank you, Mr. I yield back.
Mr. Chairman, I have a unanimous consent.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized for UC.
I would like to introduce a CNN article that explains how an alleged top leader of the MS-13 gang was dismissed. His case was dismissed in Brooklyn so that he could be deported back to El Salvador, even though he was charged with murder.
Without objection.
Mr. Chairman, I have some unanimous consent
The lady from
requests.
Washington is recognized.
I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record an article titled "Justice Department Told Trump in May that his name is among many in the Epstein files."
Without objection.
I have another one that is a July 2025 article by the New York Times entitled "How a Frantic of the Epstein Files Consumed the Justice Department," stating that DOJ and FBI employees reviewing the Epstein files were instructed to flag any mentions of Trump and other celebrities. Unanimous consent request to enter into the record an August 2025 article by The Guardian entitled "Ghislaine Maxwell Hinted at Epstein's Ties to Trump Officials. Why Wasn't She Pressed for Names?" stating that Maxwell told Deputy U.S. Attorney Todd Blanche that some of the, quote, past are in Trump's cabinet.
Without objection. Chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Patel, for coming before us to testify today. I am concerned by your repeated claims that you're not able to disclose anything further about the Epstein investigation and files, and that there's no evidence of a broader conspiracy or other people who should be charged, because the American people aren't been transparent, or that there's nothing further to be seen. In your exchange with my colleague, Mr. Roy, you reiterated something that I heard you say yesterday in your Senate testimony, and that is, under your direction, the FBI, is that right?
The money, did you say? Yes.
Yes, you said you'll follow the money. That's great. And just now you said you welcome the opportunity to investigate new evidence. So there has been significant recent reporting just in the last couple of weeks that after Jeffrey Epstein was arrested, 4 major banks flagged more than $1.5 billion in suspicious transactions connected to that suggested a massive conspiracy related to his child sex trafficking activities. Director Patel, has the FBI reviewed the $1.5 billion in suspicious bank transactions flagged to the government relating to Epstein and his co-conspirators?
I know the FBI has reviewed numerous SARs. I don't know the totality of that number.
Okay. Can you provide us with that number?
I'll get back to you.
Okay. And have you initiated any new investigation of those bank transactions since, say, September 8th, when the new report came out?
I'll check with the Treasury Department because they're the lead on that.
Okay, so Director Patel, how many individuals or entities has the FBI interviewed, subpoenaed, or compelled to tesper? Can you give us those numbers? With respect.
Not off the top of my head, I'll have to work with Treasury.
Okay. We're concerned, you see, because you say you're going after child predators, but obviously this is how you follow the money, is if you follow the bank transactions that apparently enabled the child sex trafficking. Would you agree?
It's one of the valuable investigative tools is to follow the money.
Okay. Have Jeffrey Epstein's victims have asked us to ask you whether or not you've investigated Epstein's lawyers, the lawyers who facilitated those payments. Have you subpoenaed or questioned any of those lawyers?
So in 2000,
An original sin. What do you mean by that?
basically, if you're looking at an actual pedophile ring, What you should not do is limit the time frame in which you're legally able to collect information. So search warrants that Mr. Acosta utilized in 2006 and 7 leading to the 2008 plea agreement had a very specific narrow window of years, I think 3 or 4 years. And so information pursuant to legal process wasn't collected for 10 years. Also, subpoenas were not sent out to hundreds of witnesses at the time, hundreds of victims at the time. None of that was done. None of these people were put in grand juries. And so the totality of information from the jump, instead of being this big, was like this. And that, in my opinion, is not how you run an investigation if you're trying to break a sex trafficking.
So you're now in charge of the FBI. Why haven't you done that investigation?
Great question, and here's the answer. Simply because I am not able to go back 20 years and collect information that the courts had decided was already subject to search warrants. They have said this was the investigation, there's a non-prosecution agreement out of that plea, and when the case was reopened, and this is where it comes into play, when the case was reopened in 2018 and 2019, the search warrants, again, were limited to the conduct of Jeffrey Epstein. Now, whether that's right or wrong, that's a different discussion, but I'm telling you that's the information we
well, I think
reviewed.
that is a different actions that you are today. I do want to seek unanimous into the record the New York Times September 8th, 2025 article, How J.P. Morgan Enabled the Crimes of Jeffrey Epstein.
Objection.
And also an article dated July 17th, 2025, in the Epstein case, Follow the Money.
Objection.
Okay, thank you.
Gentleman from Maryland is recognized.
Thank you much. Pursuant to Clause 2K6 of Rule 11, I move that the committee subpoena the CEOs of 4 banks, J. Diamond, Bank of New York Mellon, Robin Vince, Bank of America, Brian Moynihan, and Deutsche Bank, Christian Sewing, in order to get the suspicious transaction reports. These 4 banks have flagged to the government $1.5 billion in suspicious transactions related to the sex trafficking crimes and conspiracy of Epstein, Maxwell, and all of their collaborators. And as you know, Mr. Chairman, we got the SARS reports for Hunter Biden totaling around $20 million. And so these $1.5 billion in SARS reports we should get, especially since the director doesn't seem to be forthcoming. And I request that we do this immediately.
I think the director's been very forthcoming. We will hold any motion to subpoena in abeyance until the conclusion of the hearing. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here. It is quite clear that certain members of this committee, they want their 15 seconds on TV, stamping and coming. Maybe it's for fundraising. Maybe they're struggling in their district. They need a little bump. But they turn a committee into a clown show, and that's what we're seeing. You're being unjustly attacked today. I watched the Senate hearings yesterday. You were attacked there. We know there's an agenda. There's always an agenda. It's the same character with the same objective, and that is destroy the mega movement. You're being attacked, Director, is because you're effective. You highlighted what you've been doing in D.C. with the president in reducing violent crime. You're very effective. Another individual that was very effective with meaningful debate and dialogue was Charlie Kirk. And they killed him for it. Charlie Kirk was a man of faith. First and foremost, he loved his Lord Jesus. He loved his family. Beautiful wife, beautiful children. Just a remarkable, honorable man that was silenced with this assassin's bullet. I would say if Charlie Kirk lived in the biblical times, he'd have been the 13th disciple. He'd have been the 13th disciple. We have a new committee, if you're not aware, a new select committee regarding January 6th. I'm honored to be on that committee. I'm looking forward to working with other members to expose truth, questioning federal agencies that were involved on January 6th, like the FBI. They played a role, but we don't really know, Director, to what extent. We don't know. The January 6th sham committee was not formed by Nancy Pelosi to seek truth. It was nothing about getting to the truth about January. I spent 30 years in law enforcement, retired sheriff from a large county in the great state of Texas. I have seen, Director, I have seen more enthusiasm and support for law enforcement today because of what you and Donald Trump have done over the last 8 months to protect the American people. The American people couldn't count on their government to protect them. Crime is rampant. And now we have a president and an administration that puts the American people and their safety first. It's interesting, a few minutes ago, a classmate reached out to me and sent me I told him, I said, yes, we got Director Patel in front of our committee today. And Andy Kane wanted me to tell you, he said, quote, tell him we love him. Tell him we love him and all the brave warriors exposing the deep state. Cash, you're a great American, sir. You're a great American. Your work as the director of the FBI is commendable. It's commendable. And I want to thank you, sir. Thank you for your service. Keep up the good fight, brother. Don't let him tear you down. Keep up that good fight. You have it in you. With that, sir, I yield back.
Gentleman yield. Gentleman yield to me. Director Patel, there were 26, the gentleman mentioned the select committee, there were 26 confidential human sources at the Capitol on January 6, 2021. 4 entered the Capitol and thereby broke the law. Do you know if those individuals were being paid by the Ray FBI?
Sir, clear from this call?
That specific question I think is important to the American people. Were people who were confidential human sources of the FBI who broke the law recommended for prosecution, my understanding is, by the information we've received from you, were they actually paid by the very taxpayers who may have got charged with the same offense? I think that's important for us to understand.
I'll get back to you on that.
Thank you. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from California.
Thank you. Welcome, Director Patel. I want to focus a little bit on domestic terrorism. We have a graph here, data up to 2021, but as you can tell, domestic terrorism is on the rise. Nation, our citizens under threat. We saw the assassination of Charlie Kirk. 2 assassination attempts on the president. School shooting, Minnesota last month. And closer to home, just a couple days ago in Beach, peaceful vigil for Charlie Clark, infiltrated by neo-Nazis who essentially made the local individuals attending that event job to protect our citizens back home from those that would harm us. You have to stack. Takes a lot of work, a lot of resources. Talking to my local sheriff this morning, who said they're concerned. Federal cuts to local grants that help them do the job. Then, of course, let's not forget about other threats there are, of course, like high-tech fraud. Local senior recently was talking to me about a text she had gotten, a demand by the IRS to send a payment immediately, or the IRS agents who were on their way with this individual. Pretty gutsy stuff. By folks probably from Europe, North Korea, Russia, China. People, okay, going after those precious savings our senior citizens rely on. Yet, the president's proposing a budget cut of $500 million or more to your organization, the FBI. You've said that that'll essentially equate to about 1,300 less jobs at the FBI. So I'm going to ask you essentially, what is it that we can do to help you do your job? Little concerned. Friday Night Lights, one of the events I love to do on Friday nights, high school football game. Sit there at the stadium and you always say, what if? What if? You're the thin blue line. Can you do your job cutting $500 from your budget?
Thank you, sir. I think we are doing our job, and the distinction is with the budget that we have, we are flexing more resources to the field. California is receiving the largest FBI plus up in the union due to that plus up. They're not getting a reduction. No state is getting a reduction. Every state is getting a plus up. And so I'm utilizing the money that we have to first plus it up. And the empty that we have, those haven't been filled in years, not under my leadership.
Here's my concern. You're going to do well, you're doing more with less, is what you're saying. Yet, we're about to vote on a budget that has $88 million more to protect members of Congress, the executive branch, and the Supreme Court. There's a contradiction here. Back on Main Street, we're saying you can do more with less, you can protect them with less money, yet here in Washington, we're saying we need more money to protect members of Congress. It's a little contradiction here, or maybe, sir, you ought to talk to leadership about coming in with your management style to protect the Supreme Court, Congress, and the administration. It's essentially a hypocritical situation. We need more protection, yet folks on Main Street can do with less.
My concern is, folks, I think we received over $300 million in the big, beautiful bill, and we're also receiving pots of money from our interagency, so this sort of $500 million cut is entirely accurate.
You're still getting cut $200 million plus. You're still moving your agents to do ICE work, so you are leaving a lot of bases uncovered. And I'm not going to be argumentative with you, Director Patel. I'm just saying, if that thin blue line does not hold, people on Main Street will pay the price.
I agree with you, sir.
And I just look forward to working with you, because I am very concerned that these kinds of budget cuts are short-sighted, especially when my local sheriff calls me and says, we need more support when we're looking at budget cuts.
I'll work with you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield time.
Mr. Chairman, I have another unanimous consent request.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from New York is recognized for unanimous consent.
I seek to introduce a December 2024 OIG report from the Department of Justice, which confirms the conclusion of the Bill Barr Justice Department that the so-called whistleblower, a disgruntled former employee of the Intelligence Committee, was not a credible witness, and there were no further actions taken.
Without objection.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to submit some items for the record.
You bet. Gentleman from California.
First one, Trump's deportation diverts FBI agents off child predator cases. Director backtracks on administration's proposed budget cuts. And number three, Trump administration says 70% of ICE detainees do not have criminal convictions.
Without objection. Gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you. Director, earlier this year, the committee learned of new documents tied to the Crossfire Hurricane investigation and the Russia collusion hoax against President Trump. Your efforts in declassifying key documents tied to this investigation allowed the committee to acquire thousands of pages that it did not have previously. Did any of your predecessors make any effort to declassify these documents?
Not to the extent we have.
Did any of your predecessors share or leak any details that were classified at the time?
There are ongoing leak investigations across the board at the Bureau related to this.
I believe one of those is Mr. Comey, and I thank you for continuing that investigation. Among the declassified documents are the Durham Report Annex, the Crossfire Binder, and the Nellie Orr Criminal Referral. Could you summarize for those watching what we know about the Russia collusion hoax so far?
Well, sir, I think the record will speak that the Russia collusion matter was perpetrating a political party to go overseas and obtain information from a foreign intelligence asset, only to have that information, which was demonstrably false, turned over to the FBI, who walked into a federal FISA secret court and asked for a secret surveillance court order and lied to the federal court, and we know that because someone was convicted of it, and only to surveil the political opponent. So that is a massive scandal. We helped expose it. And in terms of the pages of productions, I provided 1,400 pages of production related to Crossfire Hurricane, and my predecessors have provided 0.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate your courage and commitment to declassifying these important documents for our review, and hope that you'll continue with this commitment. Can we expect to see more declassification efforts regarding the Crossfire Hurricane and Russia collusion hoax?
Yes.
Thank you. I yield the remaining balance of my time to Chairman Jordan.
Oh, I thank the gentleman for yielding. And Director, that's when it all started, right? The whole Russia, that's when it all began. And then it was Mueller, then it was impeached, Jack Smith and Fonnie Willis and Alvin Bragg and you name it. But it all started then. And that's why I think the gentleman from Texas wants to make sure we get all the information there. And I want to go back to when it was changed. We talked about this earlier. I just want to read to you what the CIA officer said to the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Quote, Brennan refused to remove the dossier, and when confronted with the dossier's main flaws, he responded, yes, but doesn't it ring true? That's what he initially said. And then when he was talking to this committee, he said the CIA was very much opposed to having any reference or inclusion of the Steele dossier in the intelligence community assessment. So on one hand, you got a witness who was there who said he refused to remove it even though he knew it was garbage, and then he's on the other hand telling the committee, no, we didn't want anything to do with it, it shouldn't have been a part of the intelligence community assessment, which we know it was. You know it was, you found that. Those are two entirely different stories. I think Mr. Brennan has some explaining to do, frankly, what happened there. And I think you said earlier that this whole thing, and I think you said to Mr. Gooden, this whole thing is being looked at as part of this grand conspiracy to undermine the president, whether it's Comey, Brennan, Clapper, former head of the Intelligence Committee, now Senator from, whoever it is, that's all being looked at. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
Well, we appreciate that. And part of what's also being looked at, and I think the gentleman from Wisconsin earlier, what is a burn bag for, by the way?
Generally speaking, the intelligence community obviously utilizes and possesses classified documents, but drafts of those classified documents and even ultimate finished products of those classified documents have to be recorded and or discarded. And if they are discarded, the only way we do that, the hard copies, is we literally put them in burn bags that are identified specifically for that purpose, and there is a very exact courier system in which things are obtained and the material inside is destroyed.
So it's to get rid of the material, right?
Yes, sir.
And it looks like the annex that Mr. Durham and his put into a burn bag by your predecessor, I assume, to be destroyed. Is that accurate?
Without getting into the stylization of the evidence, anything that's put in a burn bag is for purposes of destruction.
Do you find that interesting that the Durham annex was placed in a burn bag, that you would discover that when you, as the head of the FBI?
We found a lot of information in a lot of burn bags.
Well, we appreciate you finding that. We'd like to know a little bit more about that, and we look forward to that information coming forward. And I appreciate the gentleman yielding. With that, we now recognize the gentleman from Colorado.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here today. I have a couple of questions regarding a terrible shooting that occurred in Colorado.
My favorite
You've testified previously about, I think, what you would describe as your efforts to provide more information regarding the investigation with respect to the horrific assassination of Mr. Kirk. And so, in that same vein, I'm hoping you can provide this committee and my constituents in Colorado with some clarity.
Absolutely.
I think, as my colleagues know, in Evergreen, Colorado, Jefferson County, a county that I proudly represent, at Evergreen High School, a shooter ultimately injured 2 students. We're praying for their swift recovery. There's an article here from Colorado Public Radio. The title is, quote, FBI was already investigating an account that may have been linked to the Evergreen shooter. You're familiar with the circumstances generally, Director, regarding this terrible tragedy. So my understanding from the public reporting is that an organization reported to the FBI in July of this year regarding, just reading here from the article, that the FBI opened an assessment into a social media account user whose identity was unknown and who was discussing the planning of a mass shooting with threats nonspecific in nature. This is the FBI statement to the press. And that the FBI continued to work this assessment investigation to identify the name and location of the user up until September 10th, 2025, which was the day of the tragedy. What were the impediments to finding, the account user, and maybe describe in greater detail the FBI's work in that regard?
Generally speaking, yes, because I know even though the shooter's deceased, the investigation we're not done.
Sure.
And so the impediments to finding these individuals, and you highlight a great point. We had 2 huge tragedies in the span of days in this country, the school shooting in Evergreen, and proactively going out onto these social media platforms, which are so large, is our biggest impediment. And we need to rely on the service providers. There's actual legislation, I can't remember the name of it, that's up for renewal, which will, I think at the end of the month, which gives service providers the ability to report that information in from their end without liability. We need that to continue, because while the FBI has so many people and the police are great at doing it, there's just too many down on.
Well, I appreciate that, Director Patel, and I think we're certainly, I'm interested in continuing this conversation, because I think the reporting suggests that there's a pattern, and that ultimately, we want to make sure that law enforcement is able to prevent this kind of tragedy from happening in the future. I have a question. It's not meant as a gotcha question, so it just frame it there. But it is in regards to some reporting around a periodic transaction report that you had filed earlier, this year. So this is in July, pursuant to the ethical obligations as a senior executive official. You remember filing that in July?
Yes.
Yeah. So in that report, as best as I can surmise, you disclosed that you divested $100,000 or more in a variety of different stocks, which I presume was pursuant to the ethics agreement that you negotiated with the Department of Justice. In that same report, there's a disclosure regarding purchases of two different transactions. So between $15,000 to $50,000 in a national coffee house chain and between $50,000 to $100,000 in a semiconductor company on May 9th and May 12th. Are those transactions that you're doing personally, or are these through a stockbroker, or are these transactions that you're handling yourself?
So how they happen is I submit proposals under DOJ guidance to say, hey, I would like to trade this or that. And they run their review, and the FBI runs a review, and then they come back and say yes or no, and then I make the transaction.
Is there a reason that you decided to make the purchases into those two companies?
Generally speaking, before I got this job, I was, trading stocks, but not a lot, like most people, and I just follow certain industries, and I thought they would be a good investment.
So the reason why I ask, right, because you had divested in other companies, and I presume that wasn't executive officials from trading stocks, and it's bipartisan in nature. We're working really hard to get that done, Republicans and Democrats, and you can understand, I think.
Gentleman's time is...
I'm happy to give the witness an opportunity to answer.
Thank you. I'll work with you on it.
Gentleman from Alabama is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Director Patel, for being here today. Newly declassified documents confirm that the intelligence community under President Barack Obama knowingly relied on unverified and fraudulent evidence to manufacture a false claim that Russia, in fact, meddled in the 2016 election. Is there more to be done to uncover the depths and origins of this?
There is, and we're doing it.
Why should Americans still care about that, Director Patel?
Everybody wants to talk about a weaponized bureaucracy. Facts about a weaponized bureaucracy, not because I said so, but because we found the FISA documents, because we found the 302s and the 1023s. Then it becomes a political football. My job is to continue to put out that information and let the American public read it for themselves when I'm lawfully able to do so. And that's been my commitment on wherever the law allows me to do it, I will do it.
You know, when I first came in 2020, the number one concern as I was doing town halls.
Office, there has to be a grounded basis in law and fact to open up a criminal investigation. And if there's not, the investigation isn't even opened. And I've also gone back and reviewed cases that were opened in prior administrations related to public officials. And we've closed a number of them because we felt that some of these actions were weaponized on either side of the aisle. I felt it wholly inappropriate for the FBI to be playing umpire and referee amongst these decision makers when there was no factual or legal basis to continue, so I shut them down.
And I think that's so desperately needed because we need to restore trust in law enforcement and certainly in the DOJ and the FBI so that American people don't fear the very government that's supposed to protect them. And so thank you for doing that. On August 11th, you released to the committee documents concerning leak investigations that began in 2017. You believe these leaks were accidental or were they intentional in order to influence public opinion against President Trump?
When I can publicly make a final decision on that, either through a recommendation of charging that the DOJ makes or findings that I have, I'm able to do so, but they're still not complete.
Why did the FBI under Director Comey want to undermine the Trump?
I don't know. You'll have to ask him.
Think it might have been political? How will Director Comey be held accountable for his leaks and classified information concerning the Russian collusion hoax?
Well, anyone. Doesn't matter what you did before or what seat you were in. If you leak classified information, that's illegal. And we will investigate it fully. And if we can bring enough evidence to recommend charges to the Department of Justice, we will. But as you know, in these leak investigations, it's very difficult to produce the information necessary. We know leaks happen. They literally happen every week. It's one of the most destructive things to this country. Media receives classified information beneficial to one side or the other. I'm a fan of none of it, and I want to shut all of it down. And we need to bring some real cases to deter individuals from doing that, and that's my focus.
What was Comey's role in creating the ICA?
You know, speaking from my memory, as the head of the FBI, he was charged under then Director Brennan and Director Clapper and the other IC elements to come in with the NSA, CIA, FBI, and ODNI and put together a collection of information on how the information sort of surrounding Russiagate came together. So he represented the FBI in that.
Was former director of CIA, John Brennan, he's denied that the Steele dossier was used in creating the ICA. Is that true?
Well, it's, without commenting on him, the FISA has been released, and the dossier was in the FISA. It was in 4 FISAs. So I'll let the public decide.
Well, former director Brennan actually denied repeatedly that he pushed for the Steele dossier to be included in the ICA. Is that true?
Denied. I'll let
in kind of in the temple area, the religious leaders, you know, taken out at gunpoint, big problems. And I think finally the FBI trying to turn America's viewpoint on certain political issues. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about what was done in Mexico with regard to shipping weapons, fast and furious, shipping weapons into Mexico in an effort, I think, to turn the Americans against the First Amendment. But in any event, what scares me is, and all these horrible things that were done in the past, there were individual FBI agents who participated in them, in which apparently their supervisors told them this is okay or even admirable. And what I'm going to ask you, are you able to do anything to make sure that in the future these corrupted FBI agents understand the importance of religion in our life, and they're not to view it with suspicion? They understand parental rights and the idea that traditionally in America, parents have the ability to object when their young 5 or 6-year-old children or year-old or very young children are getting what most people consider highly inappropriate sexual contact. What are we doing there to try to make sure we don't have problems with these FBI agents again, or make sure that in the future administrations, they would object if they are asked to behave in such a immoral fashion?
2 things. If you are corrupt, you don't work at the FBI. It's that simple. So we don't tolerate any form of corruption or any deviation from our high standards, whether you're an agent, an intel analyst, or whatnot. And just to show the American public the resurrection that the FBI has had in these last 7 months, you don't have to believe me. Our applicant pool has month over month, every year, from the highest point it has ever been. More people want to work at this FBI than ever before in U.S. history.
I'm sure that's because of you. And you're kind of anticipating my next question. I talk to retired FBI agents in my area who sometimes retired in part because they hated the woke, anti-conservative culture at the FBI. And they are concerned, the retiring agents, about new agents, not on your watch, but before this, being corrupted in the universities before they were hired. And they are very worried about what will happen with the new agents. So I think you're answering my question. Do you feel you'll be able to a certain extent solve the problem of inappropriately woke agents filling up the agency in the past, because now you're going to have a larger pool to draw from?
Everybody that comes to work at the FBI is allowed to have their own belief system, but they're not allowed to bring that belief system into the workplace. And anyone that does won't work at the FBI.
Okay, very good. Now, recently, there's sort of another potential scandal, I guess, a politically motivated thing, Arctic. And final thing, with regard to prejudice against Catholics, what happened in the big Hindu temple there in New Jersey? Do you think, has anybody ever apologized to the Catholic Church or apologized to that temple?
I don't know, sir.
Okay. Is that something you think would be perhaps a good idea to do in the future?
I think leadership should address it.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, time has expired. Gentleman yields back the, so we got the gentleman from North Carolina. All
right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director Patel, for your endurance, and your perseverance throughout today for all you've shared. First of all, let me start by saying that I was very grateful and glad to see that the FBI has joined the investigation of the tragic and brutal murder of Irina Zarutska in Charlotte, which is just right by my district. This woman, as you know, fled the war in Ukraine only to be killed in cold blood by a man who had no business being on the streets whatsoever. This man, who had been seen stabbing Irina to death on video, had been arrested 14 previous times, served prison time, and was diagnosed with a severe mental illness. In response to the previous offense, the magistrate over his case released him to roam the streets with a $0 bond and a simple written promise to appear in court. Mr. Patel, let me just ask, should judges apply the most lenient bail standards to people with extensive criminal history?
Do they apply the most lenient?
Yeah, should they apply the most lenient bail standards to people with extensive criminal history?
That has not been my experience. That should not happen.
Is America a place where young women should fear to ride public transit?
No.
And was Irina Zarutska's death, would you say, possibly the result of Democrats' pro-crime policies?
That investigation and matter is in open trial, so I don't want to stylize.
I understand. Well, Mr. Patel, let me just say, taking over the FBI after the Biden administration's blatant weaponization of the agency is no easy feat throughout this hearing today. For 4 years, we witnessed targeting regular Americans rather than violent criminals. For example, the Biden administration's FBI spent its time and resources going after churches and Christians. We know that the FBI used an undercover agent to collect information about a parishioner. We know that the FBI investigated and surveilled a Catholic priest. And all of this was in response to First Amendment protected activity. Mr. Patel, I want to ask you, should the FBI to spy on Catholics?
Never.
So what does it say about the culture of the Biden FBI that law enforcement resources were used to go after Catholics, and some FBI employees were comfortable with taking such actions?
Well, pursuant to my transparency initiative and working with Congress on oversight, those documents, that's it. Those documents are available for the American public to see and read and hold people accountable, and that's what I'm committed to.
And so have you been able to hold accountable a guy who went after law-abiding Catholic church members?
If they did so improperly, yes.
Well, I've been a pastor for 36 years, and I've constantly stood up for life and stood up for family amidst a culture that's increasingly hostile to both of those things. And if the Biden administration targeted Catholics, could I have been targeted by the Ray FBI as well?
Well, I don't know, but I'm not going to target you.
Well, I know that President Trump respects religious liberty and that his administration is seeking to right the wrongs of the Biden administration. Securing our freedoms and protecting faith leaders and communities requires a multi-pronged approach. What would you say, in just the last few moments, what is the FBI under your leadership doing to make sure that our religious liberty and religious leaders can rest comfortable this evening?
Zealously protecting our First Amendment rights, but zealously going after those that abuse that right that leads to criminal conduct. You will be investigated, you will be looked at, and referred to prosecution.
Thank you, sir. One final area. I do want to draw attention, Mr. Patel, to Waxhaw, North Carolina, a town in my district that just fell victim to a cyber attack on September 12th that interrupted emergency. I was working with state partners, and the FBI has been notified on this attack, and I certainly pray they're able to help out with the ongoing investigation. Could you just speak to what the FBI is doing to bolster our community's cybersecurity to defend against any future cyber attacks?
Well, in North Carolina, you're slated to get a plus-up of 22 FBI employees, and they're already on the way. And that encompasses cyber, counter-intel, counterterrorism, field agents, intel operatives. And what we're doing on a macro level on the counterintelligence and cyber front is going after the people that fund these operations on these online platforms and breaking their banks. Because once we do that successfully across the board, they won't have the ability to attack us.
Well, thank you, Director Patel, and let me just add my comments to those of my colleagues that are very grateful for your leadership, grateful for your courage, your consistency, and for being willing to stand. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Patel, thank you for being here with us today. Over the past few years, we have seen a disturbing increase of attacks on Christians and conservatives. Since the leak of the Dobbs decision, there have been 354 attacks on Catholic churches. In the first year following the leak, there were more than 100 attacks against pro-life pregnancy care centers, and the shadowy pro-abortion group Jane's Revenge claimed responsibility for 24 of these attacks. Meanwhile, the Biden FBI focused resources on attacking Catholics and peaceful pro-life protesters like Mark Houck and Paul Vaughn. Many of these attacks on Christians and conservatives were coordinated or praised by dark leftist cells who lurk on the online chat rooms of Reddit, Discord, and game sites. This is a war room for Antifa. And there have been essentially no incidents of violence by Catholics, pro-lifers, or parents at school board meetings, but there have unfortunately been multiple shootings motivated by leftist and transgender ideology, including recent attacks in Nashville, Colorado Springs, Denver, and Aberdeen. Worse, the targeted violence point this past month, a few weeks ago, an anti-Christian transgender terrorist murdered 2 children and injured 17 in a shooting at a Catholic mass. And last week, while we were sitting in this committee room almost to the hour, Charlie Kirk was assassinated by a 22-year-old who appears to have been motivated by leftist and transgender ideology. As you confirmed yesterday to my Senate colleagues, he may not have acted alone, and you testified in the chat room of more than 20 trans ideologues that you were aware. I believe you said many more. Many were aware of and possibly complicit in the assassination. Director Patel, in light of the increased violence emanating from the far left, is your FBI investigating this violent trend of anti-religious, Antifa, and transgender-driven violence?
All of it across the board is being zealously investigated, no matter what your motivation or bias is behind it.
Very good. We've also noticed a dramatic surge of the number of clinics offering so-called gender-affirming care. Whistleblowers in a recent NIH study confirmed that these clinics prey on some of the most mentally ill children and young adults in our society, and these clinics are quick to prescribe life-altering puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and surgery, and often these patients get worse rather than better, and unfortunately, some have become violent, some have even committed mass shootings, and the partner of one of them assassinated Charlie Kirk. Director Patel, is the FBI looking into the role that these gender clinics may have in the recent attacks in making these mentally ill individuals violent?
We're looking at the entire spider web for any of these attacks, be it Denver or Charlie, and that's why our investigations are ongoing. We don't have a final product yet.
One of my Democrat colleagues, as an aside, mentioned, quote, the federal takeover of our cities. And I don't know whether my Democrat colleagues, for some reason, liked Washington, D.C. better when it was more dangerous and more violent, when there were more robberies and carjackings and murders and rapes. But what has the crime picture in Washington, D.C. looked like since the so-called federal takeover?
2,100 arrests, 37% decrease in violent crime, same time last year, 60% decrease in gun crimes, 74% decrease in carjackings, and 53% reduction in homicides in Washington, D.C. in the last month alone.
Very good. And I thank you so much for your testimony. I know it's been a long day, so I'll give you a little break and yield back the rest.
Gentleman yield?
My time.
Gentleman yield?
Yes, yes.
Director Patel, what's a 302?
It's a report, the number of the report, whenever an FBI agent goes out and interviews someone.
And are you familiar with the 302 where the FBI agent interviewed the whistleblower who's come forward and talked about the former chair of the Intel Committee here in the House pushing staff members to leak classified information? Well, I'll just read from it. Staffers were instructed to use, this is from the 302, interview this person. Staffers were instructed to use any sources that had developed within the United States intelligence community to gather information, which would then be made public through the media in order to compel public opinion. You familiar with that?
I am.
Yeah, and that's how they played the game, wasn't it? Leaking information, classified or otherwise, true or otherwise, to create this public opinion to compel action to undermine the president. Is that accurate?
I believe so.
Just one other point I would make from this. This witness also said in the 302 that the agent recorded that the witness provided the interviewing agents with copies of both his handwritten notes and an email. So he gave them the stuff he wrote, and at the actual time this was taking place. That's all in the 302, right?
Yes, sir.
All right.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to submit for the record an article from The Hill, Massive Crime Drop in D.C., City Sees Zero Murder Week, dated August 25th, 2025. And I'd also like to submit for the record an article from the New York Times, dated April 18th, 2025. Man who set fire on Shapiro's mansion cited treatment of Palestinians, police say.
Yeah, thank you. Without objection.
I have
Gentlelady from
UC.
Texas and then Pennsylvania.
So much. My first UC is the FBIAA letter to Congress on summary terminations, where it states denying fundamental due process and summarily dismissing special agents will only make it harder to protect our nation. These actions distract agents from their work, foster fear that their assignments could cost them their careers either now or under the next administration, and increase the risk of criminal and national security threats by undermining unity and morale within the Bureau. The next one is a CNN article. FBI agents are again pulled from their day jobs to address a Trump priority. It states morale is the worst I've seen, said one law enforcement source. The Bureau is becoming unrecognizable. Lots of people are weighing really difficult decisions right now.
Without objection. Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd request unanimous consent to introduce into the record a September 16th live article in the New Republic entitled DOJ Quietly Deletes Study on Politics of Domestic Terrorists. The Justice Department has taken down a study
on international terrorism than any president in American history. I imagine that brings you a lot of satisfaction and pride as director of America's foremost law enforcement agency. Recently, President Trump conducted very strategic and important strikes on Iran's nuclear apparatus in that country. We also know that there are concerns of significant Iranian sleeper terrorist cells here in the U.S., perhaps exacerbated by the open border during the Biden administration. What can you tell Congress and the American people about what the FBI is doing to safeguard us from potential terrorist attack by Iranian cells?
So our counterterrorism division, which is fully stocked up, watches for reflections in the intelligence streams that our intelligence community collects and produces, and works hand in glove with our partners at the CIA and elsewhere to make sure that any threat, even if it's hearsay, triple hearsay, or totally incredible, is not only fully run down, but we also take our duties to notify and give defensive briefings to those who are mentioned in those intelligence. We do both our notification obligation and our investigatory obligation.
Thank you. The FBI is also the foremost counterintelligence apparatus here in the U.S. We know the U.S. faces a more complex threat of global, more complex array of global threats than any time perhaps World War II or even superseding that time. As America continues to be under attack from various intelligence agencies globally, what can you tell us about the counterintelligence operations of the FBI as a core function?
This is why the CI mission is so important to the FBI, because as you said, no one else can do it. No one else has the authorities to do it. And even if they did, they don't have the capabilities to do it. And the CI mission has to be headquartered in Washington, but have far-reaching capabilities because we have to face against our adversaries in the DPRK, in Russia, China, Iran, and elsewhere. And in order to do that, we have to have dedicated intelligence professionals on those target sets. And since I become director, I've demanded not only a dismantling and disruption of networks, but a public display of how we're doing it so the world knows that our adversary is A, attacking us, and B, we're stopping them.
Of Venezuela, both their potential support of terrorist activity, criminal drug networks, and potential espionage entities here within the U.S. What can you tell us about your activity in the Maduro regime of Venezuela?
Generally speaking, one of the largest transshipment points and shipment points for narcotics out of South America, Colombia, obviously, and also Venezuela, is being utilized heavily by the narco traffickers to send up cocaine, meth, and fentanyl and other illegal narcotics through the island chains in the Caribbean Ocean and ultimately for America. So there has to be more work done in the region to stop waterways from being traversed with drugs bound for America.
And finally, Mr. Director, what is the one thing that Congress could most do in terms of passing a law to best support the FBI in making America safer and more secure?
Get us more authority to get online, to get onto gaming, to get onto social media companies, gaming platforms, have legal access, and also have private partnerships with the FBI.
Women of the FBI are doing to keep us safe, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Got a UC request from the gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have an article titled, FBI Flooded with Record Number of New Agent Applications, Cash Patel's. The FBI saw 5,577 new agent applications in March and more than 10,000 since January.
Without objection. The gentleman from Kansas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Director, thank you for being here. I have listened carefully to all the discussion in this hearing. I've reached two top-line conclusions. First, I am glad I don't have your job. And second, I am glad you do. Thank you for being willing to step up and serve in this role. I'd like to plow a little bit of ground that we've not spent a lot of time on so far and explore. You mentioned, and I'm well aware of your strong commitment to partnering with state and local law enforcement authorities. Obviously, one of the missions is in the counter-drug space. Another is in the forensic laboratory space. And a lot of local and state agencies cooperate in terms of evidence analysis. From the state side, programs such as the HIDA programs, very, very important in counter-drug, such as the Coverdell grants, very, very important in maintaining state laboratory capacities. Would I be correct in concluding that if we are able to maintain robust funding for those types of programs, including both Coverdell and HIDA, that would contribute to the safety of the United States and to your mission?
Absolutely.
Director, you have talked a little bit about some of the counter-drug work that you've been doing. One thing we haven't talked about yet, the President in his first actions upon taking office back in January designated a number of the cartels as foreign terrorist organizations. That's not just a paper transaction. I believe the list has been expanded since those first actions. In terms of America's military engagement with the cartels abroad, in terms of our intelligence engagement with them abroad, that designation has had real meaning and has affected some of the thinking and approaches of our military and our intelligence community. Can you talk a bit about how that designation
a mission both lawfully and investigatorially and collect evidence and provide it to our agent or agency partners? Once the foreign terrorist organization designation was labeled over to the Mexican drug cartels, we can now do that here. And in Mexico, and in Colombia, and in Venezuela, and anywhere else they are. And so that's the best analogy I have. What we're able to do is take our counterterrorism platform, traditionally used for global terrorist manhunting, and bring it into this hemisphere against a very real threat, which is the drug traffickers, and they are foreign terrorist organizations. So we just have so many more resources and authorities now directed at them.
So, for example, Director, in the regions, from the vantage point of local law enforcement, there are structures that have historically handled those partnerships separately. HIDA, for example, is an example on the drug trafficking side. The JTTFs are an example on the terrorism side. How is the thinking evolving in terms of on a regional basis, either merging or not merging those structures now that the targets in many ways are merged?
So the JTTFs are kind of our forward operating base across every single state in this country to take on that mission. And anytime you're labeled a foreign terrorist organization, you come right under the authorities of the JTTF, the task force officers, and the state and local level police work that gets done in those JTTFs. And the force layer on top of that, I think 25 or 30 across the country, specifically working with DHS and Secretary Noem to go after the drug trafficking foreign terrorist organizations, because they have unique capabilities and authorities dedicated to that mission. And so that's the beauty of the HSTF.
Let me ask you an adjacent question, Director. I noticed in your written testimony, I don't think we've talked about it yet, you brought to our attention an expiring authority. It's in 6 U.S.C. 124N with respect to loans. You point out that that authority expires in statute at the end of this month, and you impressed upon us your interest in seeing it extended in some manner. Can you talk a little bit about the FBI's role in counter-UAS work over American airspace? I represent a district that's going to host some of the activities coming up. We're obviously very interested in security, and there are limits on what our state and local authorities have the capacity to do or what our military has the capacity to do once the threat is domestic.
So it's critically important. Both the FBI and DHS have those capabilities. I'll speak to the FBI, of course, only. And you raised the World Cup, and that's exactly what we need it for. The Club World Cup, which just happened, was 32 games in at least a dozen different cities across the country, the largest sport consecutively in American history. And we used our counter-drone capabilities to not only inspect and secure stadium locations, but we're fans camps. And thankfully, because of the success of the FBI and DHS, we had no significant security incidences. And flipping to the World Cup, which is going to be 3 times as large, and obviously the largest we've ever had, and blending into the LA Olympics in 28, our counter-UAS capabilities are going to be the ones that are able us to have literal bird view of the threat dynamic around so many of these cities, which are going to see literally tens and hundreds of thousands of people flock to them. So we have to have it.
And making sure the bad guys.
Thank you again for taking the time, Director Patel, and for Chairman Jordan for holding this hearing. Thank you for depoliticizing the FBI and getting it back to its original mission as well. Director Patel, do you agree that we have a problem in the United States with politically motivated violence?
Absolutely.
And I very much agree. I think we can all agree that political violence is wrong, it's evil, regardless of which side it comes from, and that we can all adamantly and vehemently reject it, or we certainly should. But one of the things that we've noticed recently is that affinity and tolerance for political violence is not equally distributed on the aisle. In fact, right now, social media is filled with leftists who are cheering on the murder of an iconic conservative political figure, Charlie Kirk. And it's not just random people on Twitter doing this now. There was a YouGov poll a few days ago, which stated that 25% of those who identify as very liberal believe that political violence can sometimes be justified. That's far too many, is it not? It is.
One is far too many.
One is far too many. That's right. Only 3% of very conservatives said the same thing, and we can agree that 3% is far too many. But there's an astounding difference between 25% on the left accepting and tolerating political violence, 3% on the right. I would hope that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle would also recognize that there is a systemic problem on their side of the aisle with tolerance for violence against people with whom they politically disagree, that there's a cultural rot on their side of the aisle that needs to be addressed desperately. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
One of the more astounding aspects of this is that it's not just people. This comes from the very top, from their political leaders. Just a few days ago, a member of Congress of this body, Ilhan Omar, shared a video on her social media account about Charlie Kirk's murder, and I'll quote what it said. It said, "Charlie Kirk was Dr. Frankenstein, and his monster shot him through the neck." In other words, Charlie had it coming to him. The words that he said, naturally, assassination, I mean, that is a reprehensible thing for a member of Congress to say, to suggest, to promote in any capacity. And there are people across losing their jobs for far less than this. And that, by the way, is a just response to acceptance and tolerance of political violence. It's amazing to me that the political left today, who were the originators and the cheerleaders of cancel culture now have the backbone to attack conservatives for defending their assassinated friend. But there's a key difference here. Democrats want to silence conservatives for speaking obvious, self-evident, ontological truths like that men aren't women and men can't get pregnant. That seems pretty basic. That seems like a basic truth that we should all be able to agree on. Republicans, by contrast, are recognizing that a constitutional republic depends on the free and open exchange of ideas that we can debate without violence, and that assassinating a political rival is evil, it's wrong, and it should not be glorified or promoted or justified in any way, including in the way that Congresswoman Ilhan Omar did. So Mr. Patel, thank you again for being here. I'd like to, with the remainder of my time, just get your opinion. Does the FBI recognize the rising threat of political violence in America, and what can you guys do to address it?
Yes, we do, and what we can do to address it, Congressman, alone. And we need the public-private partnership, and there's another law that's expiring, I think, at the end of this month, which I believe we need to renew, that allows private sector companies to report into the FBI without liability for criminal investigatory purposes, and that's the kind of stuff we need to keep going.
Got it. Thank you, Director Patel. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Director, I want to thank you again for being here. While we're waiting for members to get back to record their vote, you don't need to stay around for these kind of motions. We appreciate the service you're providing the country, appreciate your testimony today. And you did it 5 hours straight. That's amazing. So God bless you and keep up the good work. The witness is dismissed. Committee will come to order without objection. The chair is authorized to declare a recess at any time. We welcome everyone to today's hearing on oversight of investigation. This is the first occasion for the committee to get back together since the tragic death of Charlie Kirk. Charlie was a good man, a happy warrior who fought for principles and values I think make our country special, and certainly was a strong proponent of defending the First Amendment, something this committee cares deeply. I think Charlie lived that scripture verse, 2 Timothy 4:7, fight the good fight, finish the course, keep the faith. Charlie certainly lived that, and he did it with a smile on his face. And so the tragic killing happened a week ago while we were in markup here in the committee. And I know everyone, I know our witness was a friend of Charlie's, and I know many people in the dais were as well. So I know we're all praying for Charlie's family, and I would extend a moment to the ranking.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for saying that. The whole country reacted with horror and shock to the brutal assassination of Charlie Kirk in cold blood. And there is never any warrant for political violence in America. And just as we all recoiled together at the shocking assassination of Melissa Hortman and others who died in that Minnesota attack, we all stand together categorically against political violence in America and determined to end these cycles of political violence that have traumatized the country.
Well said. Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Kansas, Mr. Schmidt, to lead us all in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As is customary, we will begin with opening statements. 5 weeks ago, because of the work of Director Patel, we learned that the former chair of the House Intelligence Committee and current United States Senator leaked classified information. Who's supposed to be guarding our secrets, why would he be encouraging the leaking of classified information? Whistleblower told us that answer as well. The leaked information was supposed to be used, the leaked information, false information, was going to be used to indict President Trump. Now, the former chairman wasn't the only person leaking information. Jim Comey was also sharing things he wasn't supposed to share. Again, don't take my word for it. The Inspector General told us this. In his report, he said, quote, James Comey violated FBI policy by disclosing classified information. And what was Comey's motive? Same as the senator from California, to sabotage and undermine President Trump's first term. And we know that Mr. Comey's not been shy about what his objective was. In fact, 4 months ago, he told us. Remember this? 8647. Jim Comey told us just 4 months ago. Now, how did the former chair of the Intel community, the former FBI director, and others in our government attempt to undermine President Trump's first term? 7 weeks ago, because of the good work of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, we learned from another whistleblower, a second whistleblower, that in the closing days of the Obama administration, the intelligence community assessment was changed. On December 5th, 2016, they had one assessment. That assessment said Russia did not impact the election vote count. There was a meeting at the White House on December 9th, 2016, where it was decided, no, we're not going to have that. We're going to come up with a new one. And the new one said Russia was trying to influence election and did influence election, which just wasn't accurate. And that new one is published on January 6, 2017. Let's just show you a few things that took place. I want to show you first this email from Admiral Rogers, the head of the NSA. You can see it was December 2nd. It says to Jim, John, and Jim. Jim Clapper, John Brennan, Jim Comey. And he says, I asked my team if they've had sufficient access to the underlying intelligence, sufficient time to review that intelligence. On both points, my team raised concern. Further states, my folks aren't fully comfortable. A few hours later, there's an email back to Admiral Rogers. This one is from Jim Clapper, and it says this: it is essential that we be on the same page and all of us are supportive of the report in the highest tradition of, that's our story and we're sticking to it. We may have to compromise on our normal modalities. This is one project that has to be a team sport. That's our story and we're sticking to it. Compromise on normal modalities, that's a fancy way of saying we're going to have to change the rules. In fact, we're not going to follow our own rules. And that's exactly what they did. To get the objective they wanted, to undermine President. Of course, it was the dossier. The now famous Steele dossier that was paid for by the Clinton campaign when they hired the law firm Perkins Coie, who hired Fusion GPS, who hired the foreigner Christopher Steele, who wrote all this garbage and lies down. That is what was used to change the intelligence community report. And what happens next? What do Jim, John, and Jim do next? They go to Trump Tower on January 6, 2017, to brief then President-elect Trump about the dossier. Again, the Clinton-financed, foreign-authored dossier that the whistleblower knows is garbage and that they know is garbage. And then there's one final step. One final step. Jim Comey leaves that meeting with the president and immediately leaks to the press that they briefed the president on the discredited information. They briefed the president on the dossier and thereby given it somewhat, creating the basis and the predicate for all they did to the president. Information, they leaked classified information, they used and leaked discredited information, and they didn't follow their own rules, all to sabotage President Trump's first term. But for this guy, Kash Patel, but for this guy, we would never have known this information. The good people of this great country would not have known what took place 8 years ago when they were trying to undermine the guy elected by we the people. And I want to thank Attorney General Bondi, up a special strike force, a special team to look into this and see if there's any criminal liability that exists in what took place. Now, in addition to getting the truth to the people, he's rescued 4,000 kids. He's got 1,300 predators who he's arrested. He's also ended the weaponization of the FBI. No more spying on parents at school board meetings. No more pre-dawn raids on pro-life Catholics. No more retaliation against whistleblowers. And he's given us information that Chris Wray didn't. Maybe said better, he's given us information that Chris Wray wouldn't. Director Wray didn't tell us that there were 20 at the Capitol on January 6, Director Wray didn't tell us that there were 17 of those confidential human sources who entered restricted space, 4 went in the Capitol. None of them were arrested. They weren't authorized to do that. They broke the law. None of them were arrested. Lots of American citizens were arrested, but the guys whose whose American tax dollars was used to pay these guys who broke the law, none of them were. One was recommended for charge. And remember when Chris Wray told us that the Richmond field office memorandum on pro-life Catholics was just a one-off? Turns out he wasn't being square with us then either. Director Wray wasn't square with us. He told us that multiple other offices were involved in targeting the Catholics. We got that information from Director Patel. We learned from Director Patel the FBI actually surveilled a priest, tried to get the priest to divulge information, break the penitent relationship and confidence that exists. And Director Patel is saving taxpayers' money. He's not going to do headquarters outside of D.C. He's going to keep the headquarters right here in the capital city. Save Americans money. Save the taxpayers money. In 8 months, Director Patel has given us the facts. He's ended the weaponization at the FBI. He's taken bad guys off the streets, and he's saving taxpayers money. But my guess is the Democrats won't focus on all that good news. They'll focus on politics. They'll stick with Comey and Clapper and Brennan and continue to try to undermine President Trump. With that, I yield to the ranking member for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Director Patel. You and I have not had the opportunity to meet, and alas, you failed to respond to the 8 oversight letters I've sent you over the last 7 months. So we do have a lot of questions piling up for you, but I want to praise the first FBI director was J. Edgar Hoover, who steadfastly refused to hire women, African Americans, and other minorities as agents. And although he was a homosexual who lived in domestic partnership for decades with Clyde Tolson, he also participated in anti-gay crusades. He aggressively promoted what we would today call white Christian nationalism. And he would undoubtedly be turning over in his grave to see as one of his successors a first-generation Indian American. And I congratulate you on being a breakthrough in this sense and being a beneficiary of the civil rights movement that opened up the FBI and the federal workforce to lots of people who never would have been hired in its first decades. Edgar Hoover's dangerous obsession with blind loyalty over professionalism and effective public policy. For Hoover, it was blind loyalty to him in keeping his secrets. For you, it's blind loyalty to Donald Trump in keeping his secrets. During your colleague noted on all sides that your primary qualification was your unwavering loyalty to Trump. Unlike other directors, you had no work experience at the FBI, but you had made over 1,000 media and political appearances in support of Trump's campaign. Your Senate confirmation vote was 51-49, the closest in history, with your opponents warning you were not qualified and had no interest in actually developing the qualifications for the job. I hoped that they were wrong. Alas, they were not. While most other new FBI directors drew on their experience as FBI agents, you didn't have that. But you did write a picture book trilogy for children ages 5 and up based on your experience clashing with President Trump's political enemies. In your book, you describe your literary alter ego, Cash the Knight, as a wacky, easily bored wizard carrying out King Donald's vengeance by driving his enemies out of the kingdom. In the books, King Donald is besieged by the evil Hillary Queentown, but saved in the end by Cash. Then Cash goes on to catch mules who are stealing the 2020 election for the great King Donald from Sleepy Joe. And then in the third book, Cash takes down the dragon of the jalapenos, nicknamed the DOJ. Your supporters had hoped that you would graduate from imagining yourself a romantic fairy tale knight to actually running America's premier federal law enforcement agency. Alas, just as we've learned how dangerous it is to put a science-denying anti-vaxxer in charge of our public health, we've learned how dangerous it is to name as director of the FBI a man who thinks of himself as a fairy tale knight who keeps a fire-breathing dragon named DOJ at home to forcibly drive villains out of the kingdom. When Charlie Kirk was assassinated, while his killer was still on the loose, You decided you didn't need to be at FBI headquarters in Washington to work with your team while the chaotic manhunt unfolded. You spent your evening dining in a swanky Midtown Manhattan restaurant and tweeting out false information that the subject of the shooting was in custody, a statement you had to retract 1 hour later. Your performance was so disturbing that even the MAGA base was alarmed. Culture warrior Christopher Rufo, who just a few months ago sat in your chair as a Republican witness, observed that you performed terribly, and he called for your ouster. The FBI might be able to survive your delusions of grandeur and the explosively volatile temper that was on display yesterday in the Senate, but the intractable problem is that you are running the FBI not as a law enforcement agency charged with keeping the American people safe, but as a political enforcement agency working directly for the president's vengeance campaign. 7 months in, it's impossible to overstate the destruction, chaos, and demoralization you've brought to the FBI and its workforce and the resulting danger your actions have caused to our country. You've been systematically purging the FBI of its most experienced and qualified agents, division leaders, and experts in counterterror, counterintelligence, and cybersecurity, precisely the people who have the expertise you lack and which the FBI and the country need. They've been expelled from the ranks of the Bureau simply because they did their duty investigating crimes, including those committed by the mob that attacked the Capitol on January 6, 2021, and beat the hell out of more than 140 police officers, or simply because you suspected them of being insufficiently loyal to Donald Trump. You illegally sacked our acting director of the Bureau and a decorated counterterrorism expert who worked at the FBI for nearly 20 years. According to Driscoll, you told him your own job, quote, depended on the removal of agents who worked on the cases against the president, regardless of whether the agents chose those cases or not. You added, quote, the FBI tried to put the president in jail and he hasn't forgotten it. You forced out the leader of the Salt Lake City field office, Mehtab Saeed, just weeks before Charlie Kirk's assassination, depriving the FBI of an experienced counterterrorism expert described by her colleagues as absolutely the best and legendary. She would have led the FBI's manhunt had she not been fired. When Trump decided that rounding up immigrants with no criminal records was more important than preventing crimes like human trafficking of women and girls, drug dealing, terrorism, and fraud, you ordered the 25 largest field offices to divert chasing down violent criminals, sex traffickers, fraudsters, and scammers to carry out this immigration crackdown. Director Patel, you treated the men and women at FBI with disrespect and paranoia. You've assembled a roving band of freelancing henchmen and charged them with conducting unauthorized investigations, targeting and harassing career FBI employees. Amazingly, you forced senior leadership to repeatedly take polygraph tests to prove their political loyalty and pushed out leaders who refused these demeaning exercises. And now we're seeing one very clear reason why you want to build a political FBI: the Epstein files. You want an FBI blindly loyal to Trump and to you as his enforcer so you can continue your cover-up of a massive international sex trafficking ring with more than 1,000 victims, betraying all of the survivors of the sexual violence. Before you got in this job, you called for full release of the Epstein files, telling podcaster Benny Johnson that the only reason the list was not released by DOJ and FBI was, quote, because of who's on that list. Upon your confirmation, you promised that, quote, there will be no cover-ups, no missing documents, no stone left unturned, and anyone from the prior or current Bureau who undermines this will be swiftly pursued. This spring, you ordered hundreds of agents to pore over all the Epstein files, but not about the money network or the network of human traffickers. You pulled these agents from their regular counterterrorism or drug trafficking duties to work around the clock, some of them sleeping at their desks, to conduct a frantic search to make sure Donald Trump's and image were flagged and redacted wherever they appeared, whether an email, a text, a letter, an interview, a photograph, or a video. In May, Attorney General Bondi reportedly told Trump that his name had indeed appeared multiple times throughout the Epstein files, and not long thereafter, in July, you and the Attorney General released a memo claiming that, quote, no further disclosure would be appropriate or warranted. In a few short months, how did you go from being a crusader for accountability and transparency for the Epstein files to being a part of the conspiracy and cover-up? The answer is simple. You said it yourself, because of who's on that list. Donald Trump's relationship with Epstein over the years is well documented. A week ago, the Oversight Committee released Trump's disturbing birthday book, Note to Epstein, written over a drawing of a woman's naked body, referring to a, quote, wonderful secret. The Oversight Committee obtained the note from the Epstein FBI, raising questions again of whether the FBI has been withholding the FBI to cater to Trump's desire to shut down the Epstein inquiry. The first 9 months of the Trump presidency have seen a spate of political violence and domestic terror events. We saw deadly attacks on political figures on both the left and the right. The brutal assassination of Minnesota Democratic House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband, and the attempted murder of Democratic State Senator John Hoffman and his wife, who miraculously survived a combined 17 gunshots. We saw an arsonist set Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's residence on fire. Last week, we saw the horrific, cold-blooded assassination of Charlie Kirk in Utah that has shaken the nation. 1 minute after Charlie Kirk was shot in the neck, a 16-year-old shooter in Evergreen, Colorado, radicalized by white supremacist ideology online, opened fire and critically wounded 2 other students. We've seen lethal anti-Semitic violence, including the murder of 2 young Israeli embassy staffers just blocks from the Capitol, and then in the attack on a gathering of Jewish people in support of hostages held in Gaza in Boulder in June. We've seen continued mass shootings at schools, like the domestic terror incident at a Catholic school in Minneapolis last month, which killed 2 children and wounded 18 others. And in August, a man fired more than 500 bullets at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, killing who was a Marine veteran and a father. People like Melissa Hortman and Charlie Kirk should be able to participate in politics as elected officials or active citizens without being shot down in cold blood in the United States of America. People should also be able to go to elementary school, to middle school, to high school, to work, to the mall, and to church without being shot down in explosions of gun violence. The important position at the FBI requires a leader who puts public safety and national security and the rule of law first. I'm afraid, Director Patel, you've given us reason to believe you've